I didn't have time to think. I only had time to choose, and that was the problem. The city was quiet outside my window, the kind of silence that only comes after midnight when even power feels like it's holding its breath. My phone lit up once. Unknown number. I knew better than to ignore it. I answered without a word. 10 seconds, the voice said, calm, almost bored. That's all you get. Then the screen split into two. On the left, my mother,
Victoria Moretti.
sitting perfectly still, hands bound but posture unbroken, like she was still the one in control. She didn't look scared. She never did. On the right, Emily, my wife. Her hair slightly out of place, her breathing uneven, her eyes searching for something steady to hold onto.
Me.
Always me. The voice came back. Choose who walks away.
No panique. No threats.
Just certainty. Like the outcome had already been decided. I stood there, the phone heavy in my hand, the room suddenly too small for the weight of it. My mother taught me everything. How to read people. How to survive. How to become the man no one dared cross. She built me from nothing, shaped every decision I ever made. And Emily, she was the first person who ever asked me to be something else. Not stronger. Not colder. Just human. 9, the voice counted. My chest didn't tighten. My pulse didn't spike. That part of me was trained out years ago. But something else moved. Something quieter. A memory. Emily laughing in the kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, telling me I didn't need guards inside my own home. My mother's voice cutting through that memory, sharp and precise, reminding me that trust was always a liability. 8. I exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that steadies a trigger finger. Except this wasn't about pulling anything. It was about letting go. I stepped closer to the window, the glass reflecting both screens back at me. 2 lives. 2 versions of who I was. My mother lifted her chin slightly. Not pleading. Expecting. Emily whispered my name. Barely audible. But it hit harder than anything else in that moment. 7. The city lights flickered in the distance. Or maybe that was just my vision shifting. I didn't move.
Not yet.
Because somewhere underneath the countdown, beneath the pressure, beneath the impossible choice, there was something else forming. A question. Not who do I save, but who set this up? And why it felt like I was already part of their plan. 6. I tightened my grip on the phone. Not in fear. In focus. Because I've lived long enough to know, no one gives you 10 seconds unless they want to see what you do with it. And I've never been good at following someone else's rules. 5. The number did not feel like pressure. It felt like permission. I shifted my weight slightly, just enough to reach the edge of my desk where a second phone rested face down, silent, invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. I did not break eye contact with the screens. I did not let my voice enter the room. But my thumb moved. 1 tap. That was all it took to wake up a network that never slept. The kind of network my mother built. The kind Emily hated. For the voice on the line sounded closer now, more interested, like they were leaning forward to watch me fail. My mother's gaze flickered for a fraction of a second.
Not fear.
Recognition.
She saw it.
She always did. Every move before I made it. That was how she raised me. Anticipation over reaction. Control over chaos. Emily's lips parted again, like she wanted to say something else, but she stopped herself. That was Emily. She always chose restraint when it mattered. She always believed I would find another way. 3. My second phone vibrated once against the wood.
Soft.
Almost nothing. But it told me everything I needed. Location locked. Signal traced. Not clean, not simple, but enough. It was never about the 10 seconds. It was about what you could build inside them. I stepped away from the window, just half a step, letting the reflection disappear, so all I saw was them. My past on one side, my future on the other. 2. I finally spoke.
Quiet.
Measured. You think this is a choice? The line went silent. Not completely. I could still hear breathing. A shift. A hesitation. That was new.
Good.
1. I let the last second stretch, let it hang there longer than it should have, because time is not something you follow.
It is. Something you take.
I do not choose, I said. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. I take both. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screens shook slightly, like whoever held the cameras had not expected that answer. My mother's eyes narrowed. Emily's widened just enough to show she understood. Not what I would do, but who I was. The line clicked. Not a disconnect. A decision. Then the voice returned, softer this time. Almost amused. Then let us see what you are willing to lose. The screens cut to black. No sound. No movement. Just absence. My second phone buzzed again. Coordinates. A warehouse on the edge of the city, less than 12 miles out. Close enough to act. Far enough to trap. I picked up my jacket slowly, like none of this was urgent, like I had already decided how it would end. Because I had. I just had not decided who would pay for it yet. And deep down, past the strategy, past the control, there was one thought I could not silence. This was not about them choosing between my mother and my wife. This was about forcing me to reveal which part of myself I would protect. The man she raised, or the man she never saw coming. I do not rush when everything is on the line. That is the first rule she ever taught me. Panic is loud.
Control is quiet.
The engine started with a low hum, steady, controlled, like my breathing. 12 miles. In this city, that could mean 15 minutes or forever depending on who wanted you to arrive. I chose the route before the map could suggest one. Side streets. Blind corners. Places cameras forget to watch. My second phone stayed in my hand, the coordinates pulsing like a heartbeat I refused to match. Emily would be counting on me, not to be fast.
To be precise.
That was the difference between us. She believed in who I could be. My mother believed in what I was. Streetlights slid across the windshield in rhythmic flashes, each one pulling a memory I did not ask for. My mother standing behind me when I was 16, correcting the way I held a glass, the way I spoke, the way I looked at people. They see hesitation, she told me once. And hesitation is an invitation. Emily years later, laughing at that same intensity, pulling the glass from my hand and telling me I did not need to win every room I walked into. 2 voices. 2 truths. Neither one wrong. That was the problem. The warehouse came into view, without announcing itself. No signs. No movement. Just a structure that looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. I slowed before I reached it. Not stopping. Never stopping. Just enough to see what was not there.
No visible guards. No vius vehicles.
Too clean. That meant they wanted me to feel confident. Or they wanted me to hesitate. I did neither. I parked across the street, engine still running, and stepped out into the cold air. It cut sharper than I expected.
Good.
It kept everything clear. My phone vibrated again. A message this time. No number. Just text. You are early. I almost smiled. Of course I was. I do not arrive when I am expected. I arrive when I decide. Another message followed before I could respond. Inside.
No instructions. No threats.
Just direction. That meant they were watching. Not from far away. Close enough to see me breathe. I adjusted my jacket slowly, not for comfort, for timing. Every second mattered now, but not the way they thought. I crossed the street without looking back. The large door at the front of the warehouse was already open. Not wide. Just enough. An invitation. Or a test. The air inside was colder, heavier, like the building held its own silence. My footsteps echoed once, then disappeared into something softer. Something controlled. Lights flickered on one by one as I moved forward, not bright, just enough to guide me deeper. They wanted me to see the path. That meant they had already decided what waited at the end of it. I stopped when the space opened up. Not because I was unsure. Because I felt it. That shift. That presence. Someone else breathing the same air. You made it, a voice said from the shadows.
Familiar.
Not in sound. In tone.
Calm. Certain.
Like this was always how it would go. I did not answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let it press back against them the way they had pressed it onto me. Then I spoke, steady, unshaken. You knew I would. And that was when I realized something that changed everything. This was never about getting me here. It was about what I would realize once I arrived. And I was already too deep to pretend I had not seen it. I did not turn toward the voice immediately. People who rush to identify a threat usually miss the reason it is there. Instead, I let my eyes adjust to the dim light, to the shapes that slowly pulled themselves out of shadow. A single figure stepped forward, hands visible, posture relaxed in a way that was too deliberate to be natural. Not careless. Controlled. Always controlled. "You came alone," he said, almost like he was confirming a theory. I tilted my head slightly, just enough to study him without giving anything away. Mid-30s. Clean suit. No visible tension in his shoulders. Not a man hired for chaos. A man chosen for precision. "You expected otherwise?" I asked. My voice stayed level, the kind of calm that makes people question their own. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I expected you to bring the city with you." That almost made me laugh. They still did not understand. This was never about force. It was about control. And control does not need witnesses. My gaze shifted past him, scanning the space behind. No obvious movement. No second presence. But the air felt occupied. That was enough. "Where are they?" I said, not as a question, but as a direction. He took one slow step to the side, revealing 2 elevated platforms across the open floor. 2 chairs. 2 silhouettes. My chest did not tighten. My breathing did not change. But something inside me aligned, like pieces finally settling into place. My mother sat exactly how I expected. Back straight. Chin lifted. Eyes already on me. Not relief. Not fear. Evaluation. Emily sat differently. Shoulders drawn in slightly, but not broken. Her eyes found mine instantly, and for a second, everything else faded. Not the room. Not the man in front of me. Just that connection. The one thing in my life that had never been calculated. "Still 10 seconds, the man said softly. "Or, did you think the rules changed because you showed up?" I let the silence answer him. Rules only matter if you accept them. I took a step. Forward, slow enough to be intentional, stopping exactly where the light cut across the floor. "You built this carefully," I said, my eyes never leaving the 2 figures ahead. "Too carefully." He shifted slightly. "Not much, but enough."
Good.
"And yet you are here," he replied. I nodded once, because I wanted to see who thinks they understand me. That was when my mother spoke. Her voice cut through the space, without effort. "You should have chosen," she said.
No anger. No disappointment.
Just fact. The way she had always spoken to me when I got something wrong. I did not look at her immediately. I let her words settle, let them try to take shape. Then I turned my head just enough. "I did," I said quietly. Emily's breath caught, barely audible, but I heard it.
Of course I did.
The man in front of me leaned forward slightly, interested now. "Then say it," he said. "Say who matters." I let my gaze move between them. Past and future. Blood and choice. Power and something I was never supposed to value. And then I saw it.
Not in them.
In the man standing between us. The way he watched. The way he waited. Not for my answer. For my reaction. This was never about who I would save. It was about what I would reveal. And suddenly, the entire room felt smaller.
Not because of them.
Because of the truth pressing in from every direction. I did not answer his question. Instead, I asked my own. Who told you I would hesitate? The silence that followed was not empty. It was sharp. Immediate. And for the first time since I walked in, someone else felt it too. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted, like pressure changing before a storm. The man in front of me did not answer my question. He did not need to. His eyes moved. Just slightly. Not toward my mother. Not toward Emily.
Toward me.
Measuring. Calculating. Waiting to see if I would see it too. And I did.
Of course I did.
Because hesitation leaves patterns. And patterns always point back to their source. I took another step forward, slow, deliberate, letting the distance close just enough to make him uncomfortable. Not threatened. Uncertain. That was more valuable. You built this around an assumption, I said, my voice steady, almost quiet, that I would break. He smiled again, but this time it faded faster. Everyone breaks, he replied. You just decide when. I shook my head once.
No, you decide for them.
That is where you made your mistake. My mother watched without interrupting. Her eyes sharper now, like she was watching a lesson unfold that she did not plan. Emily stayed still, but her gaze never left me. Not fear, not hope. Something else. Something I could not name yet. That bothered me more than anything in this room. Say it. The man pressed again. Say who matters. His voice carried a little more weight now. Not control. Urgency. That told me everything. He needed the answer. Not for the outcome. For confirmation. I let the moment stretch. Let him feel the gap between what he expected and what was actually happening. Then I spoke. You think this is about them? I said, my eyes moving between the two platforms, letting the image settle in my mind. It is not. He frowned slightly. Just enough. Good. It is about who benefits when I choose, I continued. And right now, that is not me. The air shifted again. Sharper this time. My mother's fingers tightened slightly against the restraints, the smallest movement. But I saw it. Not fear. Recognition. She knew where I was going before I finished. She always did. Emily's expression changed too. Not dramatically. Just a flicker. Like a thought she did not want to have. That was when it clicked. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. I turned back to the man. You are not the one in control, I said. You are just the one standing in front. His jaw tightened for the first time. There it was. The crack. Small, but real. Careful, he said quietly. You are running out of time. I glanced at my watch, more for effect than need. Time had already done its job.
No, irreplía.
You are. My phone vibrated once in my hand. A single signal. Confirmation. Everything was in place. Not around them. Around him. I looked past him, into the shadows, into the spaces where silence usually hides something important. You wanted to see who I would choose, I said slowly. But you never asked the right question. He did not respond this time. He could not, because he felt it now. The shift. The reversal. I took one final step forward, close enough that he had to look directly at me. No distance left to hide behind. You should have asked, I said, my voice dropping just enough to carry weight. Who set you up to believe I would ever play by your rules? And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Not in him. Not in the room. In the way Emily looked at me. Not afraid. Not surprised. Ready. And that was when I realized this was never just a test of my choice. It was a test of whether I could see hers. The moment I saw it in her eyes, everything else in the room became background noise. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer mattered the same way. Emily was not waiting to be saved. She was waiting for me to understand. That was the difference. That was the shift. I did not turn to her right away. I let that realization settle, let it reshape every second that led me here. Because if she was part of this, then this was never a trap meant to break me. It was something else entirely. The man in front of me took a half step back. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me. You are thinking too much, he said, trying to regain control of the space between us. I almost smiled. Thinking was the only reason he was still standing there. No, I said quietly. I am finally thinking the right way. His eyes narrowed. The confidence he carried when I walked in was thinning now, replaced by something tighter, more fragile.
Good.
That meant we were getting closer to the truth. I shifted my gaze past him again, not searching this time, confirming. The angles, the silence, the placement of everything in this room. It was designed to guide me to one conclusion, one reaction, one choice. But it was also designed by someone who knew exactly how I think. That was the part he did not understand. That kind of design does not come from an outsider. It comes from someone who has been close enough to see the patterns. My mother exhaled slowly, the first real sign of movement from her. Say it, she said, her voice cutting through the tension again. Not a command. A challenge. The same tone she used when I was younger, when she wanted to see if I was ready to see something she had already figured out. I turned to her this time, fully.
You already know, I said.
Her lips pressed together, not in denial, but in acknowledgement. That was enough. Emily's voice came next, softer, but steady. Then do not hesitate.
That almost stopped me.
Not because of the words, because of how she said them. There was no fear in it. No doubt. Just certainty. Like she had already made her own decision long before I walked into this room. And suddenly, I understood the missing piece. This was not about choosing between them. It was about proving whether I could see beyond what was being shown. Whether I could trust what I felt or what I was taught. The man stepped forward again, forcing himself back into the center of it. Time is up, he said, sharper now.
Say it.
Who do you choose? I let the silence stretch one more time. Not for him. For me. For the version of myself that would have answered this differently years ago. Then I spoke.
Calm. Certain.
Final. I choose neither. The words did not echo. They settled. Heavy. Immediate. His expression broke first. Confusion. Quick and unguarded. That is not an option, he snapped. I shook my head slowly. It is the only option that was never yours to control. My phone vibrated again in my hand. Not a message this time. A signal. The kind that means something has already begun. I did not look at it. I did not need to. Because I could feel it. The shift in the room. The change in the air. Plans moving without being seen. I stepped closer, just enough to close the distance completely. You built this to force a choice, I said quietly. But you forgot something. He did not respond. He could not. I do not lose people. I continued, my voice dropping just enough to carry weight. I changed the game. And that was when Emily finally looked away from me and toward him. Not as a victim. Not as someone waiting. But as someone who had been part of this longer than I realized. And in that single glance, everything became clear. She was not just inside the game. She helped design it. The moment her eyes shifted away from me and landed on him, the room stopped pretending. It was no longer a stage built to test me. It was something far more precise. A structure designed to reveal what I had refused to see. I did not move. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until it pressed against every person in that space and forced them to feel it. The man in front of me turned his head slightly toward Emily, confusion breaking through the control he had been holding onto. What is this? He asked, but his voice did not carry the same certainty anymore. It carried doubt, and doubt spreads fast. Emily did not answer him right away. She took a slow breath, her shoulders easing just enough to show she was no longer playing the part they expected. When she looked back at me, there was no apology in her eyes. No fear. Just clarity. That was what unsettled me the most. Not betrayal. Not deception.
Clarity.
You were never supposed to choose, she said softly. Her voice filled the space without needing to rise. You were supposed to see. My mother's gaze sharpened instantly, her attention snapping to Emily in a way I had never seen before. Not anger. Not even control. Recognition. Like two people who finally understood they had been playing the same game from different sides. I felt something shift inside me then. Not break. Not crack.
Align.
Every moment, every decision, every instinct I had relied on brought me here. Not to make a choice. To understand why the choice existed at all. The man stepped back again, this time unable to hide it. This is not what we agreed on, he said, his voice tighter now, directed at Emily. That told me everything I needed.
Agreement meant partnership. Partnership meant trust.
And trust in this room was the most dangerous currency of all. Emily turned her head slightly toward him, just enough to acknowledge his presence without giving him control of the moment. You agreed to a scenario, she replied calmly. Not the outcome. My phone vibrated again in my hand, a steady rhythm now, like something had already begun moving outside this room.
I did
not check it. I did not need to, because whatever was unfolding out there, it was already part of this. I took a step forward, closing the distance between all of us just enough to bring everything into one frame. You wanted to know who I would choose, I said, my voice even measured. But you never asked who she would choose. The words settled differently this time. He felt it. I saw it in the way his posture shifted, the way his eyes moved between us like he was trying to find the angle he had missed. My mother spoke again, quieter now, but sharper than before. And what did she choose? She asked. Not to challenge me, to confirm what she was already starting to understand. I looked at Emily, not searching, not questioning, just seeing. She chose the only thing that forces both of us to change, I said. Emily held my gaze, steady, unwavering. I chose the truth, she said. The word hung there, heavier than anything else that had been said. Because truth does not negotiate. It does not bend. It simply waits until you are ready to face it. The man shook his head once, trying to regain control, trying to pull the moment back into something he could manage. This does not change anything, he insisted. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. It changes everything, I replied quietly. And in that moment, I understood the final piece. This was never about testing my loyalty. It was about forcing me to confront the difference between what I was taught to protect and what I actually wanted to keep. And for the first time, I knew exactly where I stood. Truth does not explode into a room. It settles.
Slow.
Heavy. Unavoidable. I felt it in the way the air changed, in the way no one moved for a second too long. The man in front of me tried to hold his ground, but something inside him had already shifted. You cannot stand the same way once you realize you were never in control. You think this gives you leverage, he said, but the words did not land the way he intended. They sounded thinner now, like something borrowed instead of owned. I did not answer him immediately. I let my eyes move again, not searching anymore, just confirming what was already clear.
My
mother was watching Emily now, not as a threat, as an equal. That alone told me how far this had gone. Emily stood straighter than before, like the weight she had been carrying was no longer something she needed to hide. She did not look at me this time. She looked at the space between all of us, like she was seeing the structure we had all been placed inside. You built this on fear, she said, her voice calm, steady, cutting through everything else without effort. Fear of loss. Fear of choice. Fear of him becoming something you cannot control. The man's jaw tightened. I built this on certainty, he snapped. People always reveal themselves under pressure. Emily shook her head slightly. Only when they do not understand the pressure. That landed. I saw it in his eyes. The hesitation he had been hiding was no longer subtle. It was visible now, spreading through every decision he had made in this room. I took one step to the side, shifting the angle, changing the dynamic without raising my voice. You thought forcing a choice would expose weakness, I said quietly. But all it did was expose your assumption. He looked at me sharply. And what assumption is that? I held his gaze, steady, unbroken. That I would ever let someone else define what matters to me. Silence again. But this time, it was not tension. It was realization. My phone vibrated once more in my hand. This time, I glanced at it. One word. Done. I did not react outwardly, but everything inside me settled. The pieces had moved. The board had shifted. And for the first time since I walked into this warehouse, I knew exactly where everyone stood. I looked back at Emily.
You planned this, I said.
Not a question. A statement. She met my eyes, and for the first time, something softer passed through her expression. Not regret. Not fear. Something closer to relief. I needed you to see it, she said. Not hear it. Not be told.
See it.
I nodded once. Because she was right. If she had tried to explain it, I would have dismissed it. If she had warned me, I would have controlled it. But this forced me to confront it without filters. My mother spoke again, quieter now, but more honest than I had ever heard her. And what do you see? She asked. I turned slightly toward her, not fully, just enough to acknowledge the question. I see that control without trust creates enemies, I said. And trust without control creates risk. I paused, letting that settle before finishing. But the moment you try to replace one with the other, you lose both. The man exhaled slowly, like something had finally slipped beyond his reach. This is not over, he said. I looked at him, not with anger, not with threat. Just clarity. No, I agreed. But it is no longer yours. And that was the moment everything shifted completely. Not because of what I said, but because of what none of us could ignore anymore. This was never about choosing between my mother and my wife. It was about deciding which version of myself would walk out of this room. And now that choice had already been made. The room did not erupt when the truth settled. It quieted. That was how real endings begin. Not with noise, but with absence. The absence of illusion. The absence of control that was never real to begin with. I stood there for a moment longer, not because I needed time, but because I wanted to feel the weight of what had changed. My mother did not speak again. She did not need to. The way she looked at me now was different. Not distant. Not commanding. Measured. Like she was seeing the result of something she started but could no longer shape. Emily stepped forward first. Not fast. Not hesitant. Just enough to step out of the position she had been placed in. That mattered more than anything else in that room. She was no longer part of the scenario. She was outside it. And that meant the scenario was over. The man exhaled slowly, the last trace of control leaving him in a way he could not hide anymore. You think walking away makes you stronger, he said, but the edge was gone from his voice. I looked at him, not with anger, not with victory, just clarity.
No, i replia.
It makes me aware. That was the difference he never understood. Strength forces outcomes. Awareness changes them.
My phone vibrated one last time.
Not a signal. Not a warning. Confirmation. Everything beyond this room had already shifted. Whatever he thought he controlled, he no longer did. I slid the phone back into my pocket without breaking eye contact. Because this part still mattered. Not the power. Not the plan. The people. I turned toward Emily fully this time. No distance.
No barriers.
Just truth. You took a risk, I said quietly. She nodded once. So did you. That almost made me smile. Because she was right. The only difference was, I did not know I was taking it until now. I glanced at my mother next. She held my gaze without flinching. For the first time in my life, there was no expectation in her eyes. No silent demand for me to prove something. Just acknowledgement. That was new. And it changed more than anything else could have. I took a step back, creating space, not to leave but to redefine it. This does not end here, the man said again, but it sounded like a habit now, not a threat. I shook my head slightly. No, I agreed. It just ends for you. I did not wait for his response. I did not need it, because the outcome was no longer something he could influence. I turned and walked toward the exit, the cold air from outside already slipping into the edges of the warehouse like a quiet reminder that the world does not stop for moments like this. Emily followed without hesitation. Not behind me, beside me. That mattered. My mother remained where she was for a second longer before she moved. Not to lead, not to command.
Just to walk.
And that was the final shift. 3 people. Same room. Completely different roles than when we entered. As I stepped out into the night, the city lights stretched in front of me again, steady, indifferent, unchanged. But I was not. I did not feel heavier. I did not feel lighter. I felt precise, focused in a way I had never allowed myself to be before. Because now I understood something I had been taught to ignore. Control builds empires, but clarity decides what survives them. And for the first time, I was not choosing between 2 people. I was choosing the man who could walk away from both and still know exactly who he was.